What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, obviously with this kind of break that we're having from the national team and from the Clausura and all the races going on, and also with the continental competition, there is one big competition that everyone's talking about. It's the FIFA Club World Cup. That's kind of taking all the attention of what's been going on in not just in Europe, but also South America and Africa, Asia, all the continents, really looking at some really interesting games, some players, some cool stories. And yeah, also got some Paraguayans involved too, not as much as we would hope for in comparison to like other nationalities, but hey, they're still there. Some of them are still alive. We'll talk about them in just a second. Obviously, we also have, the Clausura starting very soon next week, actually. We'll see if Libertad can retain their title as champions again, or we'll have a new champion. A lot of pressure is going to be on the likes of Olimpia, Acerra, Guarani. Do we feel like those teams have been able to straighten themselves in the way that they needed to? And of course, we have to talk about the fact that we're right into the transfer window because obviously, this time of the year is when all the transfers are going on. There have been a lot of rumors about players and coming at the right time, of course, because obviously for a lot of these Paraguayan players, they need to make the moves that can get them into the right spot to qualify for the World Cup, to obviously be on the final team for Gustavo Alfaro, and also some other players that are looking, outside of the bubble, as we say in America, in terms of, making that list, taking advantage of maybe the missed opportunity. So a lot to talk about here. Obviously, the Copa America Femenina starts in a couple of weeks as well in Ecuador. We have the team from Fabio Fukamoto. We'll talk about them in just a bit about what to expect from this team. And yeah, I guess we'll go to put Fede on this one because I feel like in the continent that he's in, even though me and Ralph are kind of the host of soccer for the next few years, I say, because we have a lot going on. Yeah, in South America, feels like the vibe has been just with the Club World Cup. Of course, of the six South American teams, the four of them that qualified are all Brazilian. The two Argentine teams are out. But hey, at least it's getting the attention of some big wins. I've been able to go to some of the games as well. See Palmeiras play with Gustavo Gomez. I also see Fluminense. Unfortunately, Ruben Lescano was not able to play, but he's still part of that team, and both of them have qualified to the next stage. But feels like all of South America is on with the Brazilian teams, especially with these big European clashes that are coming up soon.
Yeah, hi Roberto. Hi to Rob. Hi to everyone listening to Guarani Vision. Like always, it's great to be back after a very short break. We only take about a week, and then we got to be back here to talk a bit more about what's been going on in the Paraguayan scene. And yeah, obviously the whole attention has been over there in the United States with this new Club World Cup happening. The format with it's all new, right? I mean, that's why I think everyone is kind of drawn to it, to the whole tournament, and also us as Paraguayans because we have a couple of them playing. Not all of them have been getting the action, but we had Kaku mentioned, especially just right before we're recording. Last night he was able to score and at least get a goal. His team is eliminated, but we got Gustavo Gomez getting all his game time there with Palmeiras. I think they're looking as one of the best South Americans to do something against the European giants because so far it looks like they're going to take it. They are the stronger teams in this tournament under the hot weather in the United States as we're staying home most of the time here in the cold weather in the winter in Paraguay. Most teams here, the first division teams at least, they've been doing preseason. Most of them got out of the city, got out of Asuncion, went to the countryside. Some went to Ciudad del Este. Now they're back here. Trying to get the last transfers. We've had a very active market that we've got to talk about. It's still going on. I think we're going to have a lot of news coming up next week also as the teams are getting prepared, ready. We had Libertad, the last champion, so you got that obligation from the big teams, Cerro Porteño, Olimpia. They got to do something in the second semester, and you're seeing that they're going all over the place in this market. We're definitely going to talk about that. But this World Cup, Roberto, I mean, it's just been amazing. I want to hear your experience about it because I know you went to a couple of games. I want to hear what Ralph has been seeing so far out of our Paraguayans. Is definitely going to be probably our main topic of the day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I kind of want to go to Ralph first, before getting stepping on his toes. But yeah, just his thoughts on kind of this Club World Cup. Obviously, there's also been Gold Cup, which again is a different continent, but still, there is that attention happening in the States. Obviously, We have also the U17 side. We have the team that actually had a really great game the other day against Turkey. We'll talk about why it was so significant. And then, yeah, this Copa America Femenina, at least, the national team is playing in some capacity in some major tournament. Obviously, it's a major step for them to obviously go and do well for, a lot of things, really. You got the World Cup happening in Brazil in a couple years as well, and I think this tournament as a whole kind of will help in it. It's not like before where it served as qualification, but it can serve as maybe qualification for the Pan Am Games that are happening in 2 years' time, the Olympic tournament happening in the United States as well. I mean, what an achievement that would be for Paraguay to play in either of those tournaments. Obviously, the World Cup would be the crown jewel, but yeah, I feel like all the attention has been on the Club World Cup, and I don't know. I haven't heard your thoughts on how positive or negative it's been for you, Ralph, for you personally, from what you've been seeing, from what you've been hearing, the quality, a lot of breaks because of weather. I don't know, Fede, you've been able to see that as well. There have been some games where because of rain, because of humidity, because of heat, because of, storms in the vicinity, they had to delay some games. And that's actually a concern maybe heading into next year. But also, I have a thought. This was actually from a friend of mine, and I'd like to hear Fede's thought. It's like with all this hot weather going on, if you're Paraguay, who, a lot of these players have been accustomed to the heat and all that kind of stuff, that must be something that they feel they can take advantage of in comparison to maybe the Europeans or maybe some other countries in other continents. You look at Paraguay and they think like, hey, we're accustomed to this heat. We know what it's like to play in these type of weather. We can't use that as an excuse as to why we can't perform. That's just my thought, at least.
No, no, I know what Ruff was gonna talk, but you threw me into this one, man. And I didn't want to get this going, but come on, the Europeans have had way too many excuses during this whole tournament. The field, we're tired because we're just coming off the season. No, the weather, the rain. Oh, come on, guys. I mean, you have the best players in the world. You have the best budgets in the world. All of them are millionaires. Even a lot of them that haven't even played. Don't even get me started, Roberto. I mean, I've heard so
Best
many
training
excuses.
facilities, best ways of recovering before and after a game, all that kind of stuff.
What I don't like is we're kind of getting away from certain things in football, and I don't like when you go into certain places and you have to go under their rules, like this rain thing and the whole suspension of certain games. But I get it. I mean, you have warnings, you have to respect them, and there's state laws and stuff like that. When you want a tournament to happen there, you gotta do what the law says, Ralph.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, hi everybody. There's so much to talk about, but let's go into the Club World Cup and yeah, the rain delays. I mean, living in South Florida for a long time, I was very used to those. My kids couldn't go in the splash and what's it called? The splash pad or something if
That's
there's
not
going to
bad.
be rain. So there was yeah, we got used to that. But I mean, for me, that's a bit older. It's very nostalgic. Some of the cooling breaks reminds me of the '94 World Cup, which was played in similar heat. And I think the big advantage that actually two of the Brazilian teams have over everybody else, particularly Palmeiras and Botafogo, is they're used to the artificial turf. So a lot of teams, especially in Europe, they don't like the turf. And I think as Bellingham was complaining, we had the same thing last year in the Copa America. I was obviously covering that tournament, spoke to lots of players, especially the English based. The Jamaica team was mostly English based. They were complaining. So that's maybe a small advantage that you do have. But otherwise, I think it's like Fede says, it's more probably a what's the word? It's more like almost a psychological thing where a lot of the European players were expecting to go on vacation, on holidays, and instead they're playing another tournament. They're playing more football. Whereas for the Brazilian sides, especially the Brazilian sides, they're in the middle of the season, right? This isn't such a big deal. If Olympia had gone, for example, apart from it would have been very prestigious. They were only going to get a small break before Clausura anyway. So I think there's something maybe there where going into the tournament you have that mentality of your wanting to play, and then maybe the European teams didn't want to play as much, or they saw this as an add-on to their season. But anyway, I think what I've enjoyed most of the South American teams have performed much better than we expected. And that should bring maybe a little bit of hope for the Paraguayan sides that find it hard often to compete with Palmeiras, with Flamengo. And then we're seeing, well, actually, those guys are giving games to European teams and even beating European teams in some cases. It also makes you think, wow, okay, so maybe Paraguayan football isn't as low a standard as we were thinking it might have been. Everybody was very worried, I think, between the Gulf with Brazil and the rest of the continent, but now we're seeing, well, it's not just Brazil and the rest of the continent, it's Brazil's pushing Europe. So really, now what we're going to have to see, if Paraguayan teams want to win the Copa Libertadores again, for example, they almost need to start getting up to a European standard, which is like a scary prospect, but also I think it's quite exciting to think about some of the plans that are in place with the big stadiums coming in. And then maybe there's just that inspiration of, if you really want to be a champion again, there's going to be some serious investment and some serious transformation in Paraguayan football.
Yeah, it's a good point that Ralph said, and I'll go to Fed on this one because obviously, Libertad have to play, and Libertad and Cerro Porteño have to play two Argentine teams in the Copa Libertadores, and obviously, Guarani, if they beat Universidad de Chile, they might face off Independiente. So that sort of thing is like, okay, you got three big tests there, but yeah, I mean, you've seen performances from them in this kind of sort of competition or in years past that they can compete with the Brazilians, and of course, like Ralph said, it is always hard to change that sort of chip towards, playing like Europeans and all that kind of stuff. But at least, we've seen from what the Mexican teams have been doing or the Portuguese teams, or sorry, the Egyptian teams, and even some of the Japanese teams that played against River, and even your Auckland Cities of the world getting a result against Boca Juniors. I mean, that was a crazy result for that. But it shows like, okay, wait a minute. If these teams that, maybe are arguable, or, definitely for Auckland City because they're a semi-professional team, but like the point is they can still go and compete, and that could serve as motivation for the Paraguayan teams, if that makes sense. You look at some of the stuff in these tournaments and you see that, okay, Boca's not in it, but you look at River that, got eliminated. That shows that if you're Libertad, and I'm sure Libertad were watching those games, preparing for that game, against, that tie that's going to happen in a couple of weeks. I think they're kind of seeing some of the stuff and they're like, okay, we can do this because that's what Monterrey did. That's what Inter did. That's what, or our Red Diamonds, even though they didn't win, but, those kind of things to make the teams very difficult to play against.
The discussion can just go on and on, guys, because we can discuss, the format of the tournaments. We stopped midway in the year. The Brazilians don't do that. They have a totally different way of playing. They they play every 3 other days. They're accustomed to this situation of a tight calendar, of kind of a World Cup situation, and playing big teams all the time. I mean, they have such a competitive league. I mean, it's so hard to compare yourself to them, even from the Argentines. I mean, we saw what River and Boca had to go through, and look at their budgets, look at everything that they have. Just to mention, Matias Rojas, who's getting paid millions and millions to just sit in the bench and not have a single minute. In River, I mean, they got those kind of players, and I'm not pointing my finger at Rojas. I mean, they got those kind of players. They've hired those kind of players because they knew that the World Cup was coming up. I think even River was the team that really looked into European experienced players and put them in their squad all together. But it was still not enough to play against an Inter in that last game. And you saw these kind of situations happen with most of the South Americans. Thankfully, the Brazilians have come up. They've shown really good stuff so far. Hopefully, they can still go on. I'm really looking at Palmeiras especially. But yeah, this River situation, especially because they're going to play against Libertad. They've probably been one of the teams that I've been following the most, and they're going to lose now their star, Mastantuono. Between our last show and this one, everything has been confirmed. He's going to Real Madrid. He's out of the World Cup now, so they got to do something without him. Let's see what kind of signings they are also going to bring to the table, because when you have a big team that kind of clashes down in a huge tournament like this one, they might let go of a bunch of players and bring in a kind of a new squad. I'm kind of expecting that from Gallardo now. He needs to have a really good Libertadores. He cannot lose against Libertad, so they're going to come all out, and Libertad is going to have home advantage. And what I'm talking about is they're going to play in their stadium, guys. This has been confirmed, and this is huge news for Libertad, I believe. It's not the same thing to play in Defensores del Chaco than to bring that team into your neighborhood. It's not the same. It's not going to be the same amount of people in the stands, and Libertad's going to make them feel like they're going to play in a hard place. And I'm looking into that first match because it's going to happen in Paraguay, and then they're going to play in River Stadium. But I'm looking forward to it. It's probably going to be one of the biggest clash downs of the year, and River is the one that needs to get ready for it. I think Libertad already has their base of players. They're just looking into the market to see what else they can bring into this team, Ralph.
Yeah, it's a great point about the stadium because Libertad's record in La Huerta is very good in continental competition, and they've always had the issues of it, whether it's up to CONMEBOL standard or not, but they've worked so much on it recently. And then they really can pack that stadium out. And I mean, for people that aren't followers of Paraguayan football, maybe don't know, but Libertad is always that kind of team that people make fun of, that they don't have many fans compared to Cerro Olimpia. But we've seen they've been doing so much kind of grassroots work to get fans into the stadium, and some people say it's a bit manufactured because, of course, there's a huge owner behind it. But eventually that starts paying off because you look at Manchester City, for example, going back to the Club World Cup quickly, they've been one of the best supported teams and especially of the Europeans and the English side. But also they've now surpassed a lot of teams back in England in terms of average attendance, which you just wouldn't have imagined 10, 15 years ago before that started. So maybe it's a bit artificial at first, but that ends up planting seeds that brings people. And you do see those Libertad games you get some good atmospheres now in La Huerta, which honestly was not the case in the past. I mean, even when they're going for championships, sometimes there weren't that many fans. I remember watching Diego Gomez for the first time. I got to see him a few years ago, and we were very few people in the stands. That was back 2022, but recently it's been a big difference. So I think that's going to be a great game, the Libertad River Plate, and we shouldn't underestimate the home advantage of using their stadium.
That's a really good point, and it even plays into maybe even for River Plate as well. Maybe they feel like, oh, after being bounced out of this tournament, it kind of feels like we need something to raise our momentum. But at the same time, they shouldn't also underestimate what Libertad are trying to do. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. That game's not till August actually, so there's still a little bit of time. There's obviously still the Clausura to talk about, which we'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, we also have to talk about some of these players that you'd mentioned. The likes of Matias Rojas. We don't know what his future could be. I know there've been some rumors about Alex Arce heading back from from Liga de Quito back to Rivadavia, where he used to play. Really did so well. What's going on with Ramon Sosa, if he's going to Palmeiras from Nottingham Forest. No one knows if that's a big deal. I know they were trying to get him for the Club World Cup, and it doesn't seem like it's going to happen anyway. Julio Enciso, nobody knows. I saw a report the other day saying that maybe Porto is probably not going to go to him, so that leaves other teams going on. I mean, Ralph, where to start? I mean, I guess looking at all the transfer that's been going, kind of the rumors, what's one player that you're kind of interested in, be like, okay, this guy has to go somewhere to go and get his form back, I guess you would say, in the to really perform well on the domestic side, and then obviously do well for the national team.
Yeah, I mean, I think Enciso's top of my list in terms of we're seeing Julio Enciso in his best moments because he finally got to play at Ipswich, but also he got to play free like he's doing in the national team. I remember I asked him a question before the Copa America when we're doing the pre-match press conference of where he prefers to play left, right, middle, because at Brighton he was getting moved around and he was kind of like, yeah, I'll play anywhere, like players have to say, right? But really, he's found his position is playing as the second striker in the middle because he wants to get the ball. But also that means if he's a winger in the modern game, he has to do too much tracking back, and he's just that we lose so much of his game if he does that. So we talked about it already, right? How Almiron has stepped into that almost more defensive role to protect him, to give him that freedom. So he got that at Ipswich. He's not getting that at Brighton. He won't get that at Brighton because they're not going to play that way. So I think for me, it's is where Enciso goes and who picks him up. And I mean, I know he was linked with Porto and Inter, but honestly, I'd be happy for him to go to a smaller team where he's the star because that's what we want to see. Him getting lots of game time, him doing his thing, so he can kind of smoothly interact into the Paraguay team and their national team. And then for other players, I mean, not you talked about getting form back, but I was just thinking about players that are excelling and can move on. And for me, it's Alderete. I feel like Alderete's been so good now for a good 18 months or so. He's such a solid defender. He's in the La Liga Team of the Year, by the way, or at least by the Who Scored rankings. I don't know if the official one. And he's too good for Getafe right now. I mean, he can move on. I think he got linked to some Premier League clubs back in the last window. I saw something come up again about another club, which I can't remember, but it's all rumors for now. But I really think Alderete is a player we might see move on, and he's one of our few players, right, that are in the top five leagues, along with players like Enciso and Sanabria. The but he has that big moment ahead of him because at his age, when you're a central defender, this is actually your best years, and so let's really hope he gets another big move and we see him. And then just finally, before I throw back over to Fede, I think the players that are based in Russia really want to get out of there. So if we're honest, they've been trying to move. I mean, Junior Alonso made it back. Balbuena is another player that he's really trying to move on. I heard there's a rumor about MLS because his agent is of course Diego Gomez's agent. So we know that track record in MLS of taking Diego Gomez was such a big success. So I think that's again his defenders, right? But I think we might see Balbuena make a move out of Russia as well.
As of right now, guys, after listening to Ralph, I'm even more and more worried about our situation because, I'm thinking about our lineup in that game against Uruguay, we would just, I believe, my favorite team, the starting lineup, and I'm looking at that team, and I'm thinking we only got 2, 3 guys that are gonna stay in their team as of right now. Most of them are gonna change teams, and they don't know where they're going. So to Rob's point, we got to wake up their ages or something because they got to put their players in the right spot. They got to move the players right now because the national team is doing really well. This is the time to sell them. This is the time to put them in a big team because the World Cup is about to happen. So you need them competing at the highest level. I'm talking about Julio Enciso. I'm talking about Ramon Sosa. I'm talking about our stars, the players that make the difference. Tony Sanabria, is he going to stay in the Italian league? Is he going to go somewhere else? I mean, these guys got to know where they're going to play. I know right now most of them are still on vacations, but I'm talking about their ages. And I thought we were going to have some news coming into this episode particularly, but as of right now, I'm worried. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, everything turns out and everybody knows where they're going to play and they're going to have enough playing time because obviously that's the biggest worry for most of them. We're even seeing a lot of players coming back to the local league because they want to get under Alfaro's radar. Also, they've been out of the list most of the time lately, and somehow they want to make their way back into the World Cup list. But I'm worried, Roberto. I want to see Julio Enciso play for an Inter kind of team. I want to see him play in a big team. I want to see where Galarza is going to play. I agree with Raf. I think Alderete is ready to make a leap, but I don't know where else he can play. He's gone to Germany. He plays in a good team in Spain. Obviously, it's not a big team, but I mean, you're gonna need somebody to come and pick him up, and he's not easy to sell. Our players right now. They cost a lot of money because they're doing really well. So it's not an easy sell. Even Ramon Sosa, Palmeiras wants him. They're going to have to put the money for him. Somehow, even though he's not being used in Europe, some of these transfer rumors I'm not liking because for some of these players, I feel like it's a step back. To be honest with you guys, the Alex Arce situation, the Ramon Sosa, I'm thinking, oh, I thought these guys were going to make a leap. I thought they were going to take a step forward, and it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, it's I'm going to Ralph after this, but like it does feel that, and the good news is we still have a couple weeks until the actual start of the transfer window. So, that's when the business starts to really get going. We know that Diego Leon is actually going to start going to Manchester United soon. Obviously that's going to be one to keep an eye out to see what he does as well. But my whole point in all this is that, okay, you take advantage of some of the team, and you got Ana Nunez, for example, another player that just left. He's heading out to Nacional. He's going to play in the Portuguese league. There are a lot, again, I'll go to wrap on this one, but there are a lot of moves that you feel that depending on what happens, and Alfaro has always said that, it's always never determined on what you do, at your club level majority of the time. But I'm sure he's thinking to himself, wait a minute, if this guy's not performing to the extent that I want to play, and I look at someone like Alex Arce, And you look at someone that maybe you look at the competition that he has with Avalos, Tony Sanabria, and Pita. There's only going to be so many players that can make a squad for either one, your qualifiers, two, your friendlies, and then eventually your final squad. Because I don't think all these players that we're seeing right now, I don't know if all of them are going to make that final squad next year because it could determine a lot of things, injuries, form, everything. Um, so yeah, it really is that move that you make, where you make it, how you make it, that sort of thing that can really help you in the long term in your career if you want to be on this national team. Because I agree with Fede. A lot of these players want to be on this national team, especially since they're doing so well. So, it's kind of like going on the bandwagon a little bit, but I think that's the reality is that a lot of these moves right now, heading into the new season or mid-season, I guess, with happening in South America, um, every move has to be the right one because if they make the wrong one and they feel like, oh, I'm out of form, I'm not performing to the extent, I'm not being um, pushed enough in terms of competition, depending on what league you go to, that can go a long way in terms of how you could be considered for your national team. Same thing for, this is kind of an off the record sort of story, but I had the fortune of being with Oscar Romero on a plane heading into Paraguay this month. And, he told me that Alfaro is sort of speaking to him in terms of, keeping his tracks. He's right now at Internacional. Um, so it's those little things that could determine how well you do, where you're performing and that kind of thing. Because I think again, a lot of these players want to be on that Paraguay squad, one way or the other, but it also determines on how you're performing outside of your national team.
Yeah, and I mean, football, the career of football players is very short and it's built on the small moments, right? Like you're saying, is it's making the right move at the right time, and that can be such a big difference for careers. I mean, we're talking about Sergio Diaz's signing for Luqueño. I mean, that guy was at Real Madrid when he was 19 with Odegaard and Valverde, and there was a combination of factors, but including injury, but it's sometimes those small little decisions, right? Or I always think about Derlis Gonzalez when he decided to come back to Paraguay. And sure, I'm sure he had a great successful career in Paraguay, but of course he had the ability to be playing in Europe if he really kind of stuck it out. Alan Benitez was in Minnesota and he didn't like the cold and he went back to Paraguay. I mean, these little things, but they're small moments that you have and opportunities. So yeah, I think that's a huge thing for all of the players to consider. And then we go back to are they being advised correctly and what are they doing, which I think we talked a bit before about players like Enciso, for example, off the field and that kind of thing. So there's so much goes into it. And then in terms of what you were mentioning about, yeah, everybody wants to get into the national team. I mean, there's the base that are already there that are they will feel pretty sure that they're in that team, right? I would say like 2/3 of that team, 3/4 of that team really will feel pretty secure. So it's those ones that are on the fringe, and most of those guys are the ones in South America still. And I think what's going to be really interesting, I know we're going back to Club World Cup quickly, but don't forget how much money those teams have just won for the market. So the Brazilian sides are all like $20 million plus now. Even the Argentinians, the two Argentinians took like 17, 18 million. I mean, they have a lot of money to spend, good salaries to offer. So if those players are between a lower European side or these big Brazilian sides, they might end up going to the Brazilian sides because they're gonna have the money now. So that's another thing to think. But I'm specifically talking about Ramon Sosa, right? I mean, I would imagine Palmeiras have got themselves in a position they were already financially very secure, but now they can offer some serious money, having just they picked up at least 20 million, I think, in this tournament. So I mean, it's interesting, but there's going to be, I think, a little shift in South America and what they can offer because of the Club World Cup, because then that money will flow into other clubs as they buy players, and we might see more players hanging around, let's say, the continent instead of trying to make the big move to Europe. But I think back to your point, your original point, Roberto, it's so important. Like it's just moments, it's small moments, and this is a small window, like the transfer window, where I think a few players, again, only a handful of players that are on the fringes, but this is their moment where they could make the big difference and be in the World Cup when maybe they haven't been in consideration in the last few squads.
But it's got to be Enciso, right, guys? I mean, the big move in this transfer window has to be Julio Enciso going to a big team, or you think there's going to be another one of these Paraguayan players that plays around the national team that's going to make a big move? Because Ramon Sosa to Palmeiras, it's a good move, but I mean, you're leaving the European scene, you're leaving the Premier League. You barely played there, also. It's not like you're coming off after playing 2-3 years. So you're back into the South American scene, playing Libertadores again, fighting for a spot. Obviously, you're gonna have Gustavo Gomez there under you. He's gonna take care of you. He's gonna help you out, but I mean, for me, looking at the big football scene in Europe, I mean, it's Julio Enciso. I mean, the rumors about him going to a bigger club, he needs to go to a place where the coach wants him, where he's going to be important, where they're going to build a team, not around him, but where he's going to be an important part of the team. And for me, out of all the rumors that I'm hearing, I mean, if Inter Milan is a reality in this situation, I mean, please take it, because that would be a fantastic spot, I believe, for Julio Cesar to just keep on growing. He's our biggest star right now in our national team. Obviously, we can discuss it with Miguel Almirón, but he's an established player. He's a star in the MLS. I'm talking about the players that I want to keep on developing, and this is Julio Enciso for me, Roberto. I don't know if you're waiting for a bigger move, but I'm really excited about what can happen with Julio Enciso in the summer.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a determined sort of step that he has to make in his career, especially that he's still so young, and like you said, he's kind of the brightest gem that Paraguay have, and maybe the most talented player on this squad. So yeah, no, there's a lot of factors coming in, and it's going to be interesting what's going to happen within the next month or so. If, like, if he stays in the Premier League, if he's going to a different league, that kind of thing. That's we're gonna basically going to be on Julio Enciso watch the entire time. I'm sure all of us and even all of Paraguay are going to be on Julian Ciso watch of like what's going to happen in terms of his next step for his career. In terms of next steps, yeah, another big one as well for the national teams. We're talking about, of course, the U17 team that happened in a tournament in Europe. Ralph, I'll give you some more information on that. I'll let you hold the baton before we go into the Copa America. What happened in the U17 squad?
Yeah, so I mean, the Paraguay under-17s are obviously preparing for the World Cup, which is later this year, and they're playing in Venezuela, this like UEFA CONMEBOL tournament. I'm not sure exactly. These tournaments sometimes get creative, but it's great experience for them. And they came off a defeat to Venezuela, the hosts, 3-2, where they conceded late on. It was a game, though, where I looked at the starting lineup and said, I don't think this is going to be the team you see in the World Cup, or not exactly that collection of players in that 11. I think Uglisic was trying some things out. But then yesterday they faced Turkey, and I have not seen in all my years of following Paraguayan football, when Paraguay defeats a UEFA team so convincingly. They beat Turkey 5-0. All 5 different players on the score sheet. You have your players like Pedro Villalba, which everybody's been looking at. He's been such a good player. I think was Milan Freyes got a goal as well. I mean, it was a really complete performance, and I think for me that got me very excited all of a sudden of what this team could be doing in the World Cup. We're talking about transfers, right? I mean, the under-17s World Cup is such a huge moment for players that are hoping to maybe get picked up and taken to a bigger team around the world. And so that was a really exciting, I think, result and moment for us to see the under-17s doing so well. And remember that this under-17s is the same under-16s that won the Sudamericano before them. So it's just been such a great process we're seeing. And we've talked about how Paraguay national team is doing so well across the board with all these youth teams, with everything. And this was just another indication that things are going very well for the Albiroja at all levels.
Yeah, guys, I'm really looking forward to what it can happen with this team. The thing is, I don't know when they're eventually going to have time, coming up into the senior national team with such a tight squad as of right now, and I don't see Alfaro looking that much into such young players as under 17 or under 20s even as of right now. They really got to make a big difference, but to be playing these tournaments, I mean, I think it's huge just to get these invitations lately. And we've been seeing that. I mean, over the past 2, 3 years, I think it has to do with the FA is doing, putting themselves out there. And it's great. It's huge to have these guys go all around the world and play these kind of tournaments. It's an experience that is gonna come back to them eventually when they get an opportunity in the senior national team. And we weren't seeing that much of that, these kind of tours around the world over these last 10 years. So I'm kind of happy with that. And I think it has to do with a lot that the senior national team is doing well. Also, we've been doing well with results lately with the national team. So I think it has to do with that also.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it really is. And, I think it's always going to be a risk when Paraguay are obviously going in a performance when they're doing so well. And, that raises expectations and all that kind of stuff. And you don't want them to fall flat on their face, obviously keep them really with this sort of momentum in the way that, you know, it feels as if though there is that sort of feeling that, using a comparison with like Ralph just said, like unlike the women's teams that because it's different, like they have U17s and U20 players. We'll talk about that in a second, but like there is still that feeling of not wanting to burn out a player and you want them to develop in the way that they are performing. The U17s are there, the U20s are there, U23s are there. The senior team, if you're really good, you'll be on that team. And even looking at some of the Paraguay squads, I think Enciso's the youngest one, and he's like what, 21? So in theory, and he's only there because he's really good. Whereas all the other ones, they're all senior players. You don't see anyone of that U23 in comparison. Like, okay, maybe Diego Gomez, but again, different type of player. So you have to be really good and determined and ready to be on that team if necessary. Who's to say that if Diego Leon, for example, I'm just using a big example, but let's say he's doing so well in Europe, whatever happens to him, then yeah, obviously because of the quality and the advantage that you have, or now that Nunez, for example, then yeah, obviously you will get that consideration for the national team. But it's not like anyone can make it. You have to, Rob, you have to sort of feel. Sorry, Fede, you were gonna say something.
No, I was gonna mention the Google Cuenca guys. I mean, Alfaro just picked him out of nowhere last year, and he got an opportunity in the national team. Now we're waiting for him to get healthy in Genoa. Hopefully, he starts playing at the beginning of the season and can come again to the national team. But he's one of those young guys that we're talking about. That hey, if they have a good opportunity and if they start playing in their team, a European team like Diego Leon you just mentioned, maybe they could be a surprise in the upcoming list.
Yeah, Ralph, I feel like that's kind of the feeling that a lot of these Paraguayan players have, not just those that are trying to make moves, but also what they're doing for their youth teams as well.
Yeah, that's right. But I think what we're seeing that is much better and healthier is more about creating these slow pathways and not necessarily skipping age groups and moving up. But also what it's doing is it's creating those little groups of players that start winning things together. And that's so important when they eventually get to the senior team. Because I mean, you look at, for example, Julio Enciso and Diego Gomez. I mean, they won so much stuff together at Libertad as kids, and they moved up together, and now they're in the national team together. But then what we want to see is hopefully those experiences where you win stuff at U17s, U20s level, and it kind of just builds you up into the senior team. So I think that's the more healthy way of looking at it. Not necessarily that we might pluck a player from these sides right now and kind of fast track them in, except for somebody like Diego Leon. But Diego Leon's he's a bit different because his physical quality is already there. So I've spoken to a lot of under 17s coaches before about players that look like they're really good, and they say, yeah, but physically this person, they can't go and play against adults. They're doing really well in their category, but you've got to see how they develop. And then you get obviously some people who naturally or genetically or whatever it is are much more athletic, like a Diego Leon, and that's when you can throw them into the senior game, and they don't really feel that kind of the roce, the choque, like they say in Spanish. So that physical side isn't the issue, and they can go on. And I think Leon's he's a great example of somebody that is in a position that Paraguay really need, right? I think right back and left back are the two positions where they're playing with different players, but also especially at left back, they don't really have the solution because Junior Alonso is more a central defender, but he doesn't like playing Sandes because I don't think he gives him the security. So you need somebody that's a left back, but that can also defend. At the moment, I don't think Diego Leon's there with the defensive side, but we'll see. Going to Europe, some of that tactical awareness, some of that coaching, he might be someone to break in. But overall, I think I'm very happy with the structure that Paraguay have put in place. And I think it's, like I was saying, much healthier to do this step by step and get the players up to the level when they're ready. You're on mute, Roberto.
Sorry about that. I was taken aghast about what you said. Yeah, not rushing is the word I'm taking about. You know, not being able to rush that sort of development when necessary. And if they're ready, they're ready. That's the thing. So talking about ready, we got a Paraguayan team that is ready to participate in the Copa America. We talked about the women's team because obviously they're participating in this Copa America Femenina happening in Ecuador on July 12th. So just in about a couple weeks. Obviously, the way that this tournament works for Paraguay as a whole. They're in a group with Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, and Bolivia. The other group, obviously, with the other five CONMEBOL teams. The top two from each group qualify to the knockout stage, and the third place team heads to the fifth place match. And I think that is also certainly a way that you can also help qualify for the Pan Am Games and obviously the Olympic tournament, because as before, this is not the tournament that's going to be necessary for the for the actual World Cup that's going to happen in Brazil in 27. That's going to happen on another time, which we'll talk about when it has to be. But yeah, Ralph, I'll go to you on this one as well. Looking at the squad that Fabio Fukamoto has made, and it's a tricky group, I would say, because obviously you have the powerhouse in Brazil that are always going to be powerful. You have Colombia, who are always a tricky team when it comes to playing, and have done so well recently in terms of what they've done in the Olympics and the World Cup and all that kind of stuff. So Paraguay have really got a nice test in terms of qualifying out of this group. And yeah, I guess it's the group of death when you look at Ecuador, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, and Peru being the other one. So there has to be only one. But how do you fancy their chances? And just looking at some of the players that we have that you can keep an eye on. Fede, I'll go to you after this as well. What do you look at this squad for this team heading into this tournament?
Well, I think the kind of overriding thought about this is youth and age, because first you got Fabio Fukumoto, who's this is his first head coach job and he's only 37. And so this is a big task for him. But he'd been in charge of the youth team for a long time in Paraguay, or a couple of years before, like building up to this. And I looked at that side and said, I mean, one, you've called up Claudia Martinez, who she was so good in the under 17. So that's a player who has come straight up. Also, Fatima Acosta, she was the star in the under 20s. But then there's a lot of young players in there, right? You have people like and local based players, which surprised me a little bit. So you have like Belen Riveros, who's doing well in Cerro. She's only 22. You have people like Diana and Benitez in Libertad. I mean, it's kind of a young side. You still got some of the classic stars. Of course, Jessica Martinez is there. She's just finished her time in Saudi Arabia. She's looking for a new club at the moment. So she actually just got her Spanish nationality. So I think maybe she's heading back to Spain now that she's got that sorted out. But we'll see. But I thought the overriding thing, I looked at this, I said, this is quite a young team and a lot of local based players. In a way, it's a little bit of a gamble, but I don't think gamble is the right word. I think it's a bit of an experiment, knowing that, as you mentioned earlier, Roberto, this isn't actually the qualifiers for the World Cup. So we're seeing this Copa America Femenina a bit like the old Copa Americas back in the day, when for in the men's, when they used to use the Copa America sometimes to try out players ahead of the World Cup qualifiers. And I think we might see something similar here, because honestly, it's for me a very young squad, but it's exciting to see these players in there.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that, Ralph. I think it could be, the filter to see what the real squad going forward is going to be like, because like Roberto mentioned, we have to wait until 2027 for the next World Cup, and in the process next year we'll have that opportunity to qualify, which is something that these girls want to do. I mean, last time around we were so close to it, and they feel that doubt, and we have new players now to chip in that situation. And really, for me, going into this tournament particularly, I want to see those three players come together. I mean, Jessica Martinez, obviously what Claudia has brought lately also has been just spectacular, what we saw from her. the way that she handled every single game, and how many goals she was able to score. Claudia Martinez is looking like a bright star also in the Paraguayan scene, but we've seen very good players also, I think, develop in Europe lately, and I want to see all that come together. I want to see if we have enough as of right now. So I like the challenge of the kind of group that we have. I don't take it like Roberto, like, oh no, we're in a very hard group. Let's see how we do. No, I'm thinking let's take this challenge and hopefully let's get through it. There might be a couple of names that won't be on this list as we head forward, but I think it's an opportunity for most of these girls that play in the National League to put themselves out there. But because what we're seeing lately is when they play a tournament like this, they usually get sold later. So there's a lot of scouting going on in the Copa America and these kind of tournaments. So I'm looking forward to that, for big moves going forward, as we're in that process already of World Cup 2027 under a new coach, which was also going to be interesting to see his ideas in this tournament.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's going to be very interesting. And yeah, obviously you have to, if you want to be the best, you want to be the best teams in the continent, you have to beat the best. So I kind of feel like that is sort of the mentality that one has to make. So it'll be interesting. We'll obviously talk about that tournament when it comes. And we do have to talk about the tournament that will start very soon with the Clausura. The 2025 Clausura is coming thick and fast. Obviously, we already have our fixtures for the moment for this sort of tournament. And, I think a lot of attention is going to be made on a lot of these teams and how they perform, because I think some of them obviously want to dethrone Libertad. We obviously seen Cerro Porteño make some business of some players being moved. It's not been official, but there have been some players coming in with the likes of probably, we talk about left backs and, fullbacks as a whole. Blas Riveros possibly leaving Talleres to go to Cerro Porteño. We've seen also some rumors of possible transfers or swaps, I would say, of Fabrizio Peralta coming to the country as well. Pachi Carrizo making some swaps with Ivan Franco with Libertad. There's a lot going on here, and I think it's involving Cerro because, obviously they are the team with Libertad that are participating in continental competitions. And yeah, we'll go to Fede on this one. We have the first game coming up next week. Cerro Porteño kick it off against General Caballero. Libertad taking on Sportivo Luqueño. Olimpia taking on Nacional. Guarani taking on Dos de Mayo. Really some big fixtures in this one. So I'm curious to see what are your thoughts on, some of the moves that some of the teams are making, some teams that kind of you have to keep an eye on. Who do you feel is the favorite? What do you say for this upcoming Clausura beginning in literally a couple days?
It's so hard to predict what's going to happen because of so many moves that have happened and so many that are still to be made. So I don't think we're going to see the real teams until the fifth game, maybe even, especially Cerro Porteño. And I don't know, there could be another one of the teams like Guarani that was still in the fight. They're still, bringing in players and young players. I don't know if we're going to have enough to fight because they're letting go of some of their players also. It was kind of weird for me what happened in that team because I thought that they had a really good semester under Chiqui Arce, and apparently they didn't have enough budget for what he wanted going forward. So they went in a totally different direction. They went for Bernay, who's going to be their coach this season, and they're kind of building a younger squad now as you're seeing what they're bringing in. My expectations obviously are always on Olimpia and Cerro Porteño. Olimpia, I think, kind of took an advantage in that sense in the market going forward as they brought in so many players. I mean, what they bring, 8, 9 players. Some of them are coming back on off loans also, as they are Olympia players, but they were playing in other teams in first division in Paraguay, like Romero, for instance, who's coming back from Trinidense. Capasso also is a comeback if we think about it, that he already put this jersey on. But there's a whole bunch of players, really, Roberto. I think we're going to see a brand new squad from this Olympia team. And for me, I think it's Olympia. Hopefully they take that advantage, in these first games where I think Libertad is going to be thinking way more about what they can do against River. I think they're going to be getting ready for that game in particular. Libertad has barely moved so far in the market. The information that I have is they're eventually going to do everything they can to take Pachi Carrizo away from Cerro Porteño. That could be confirmed in these next couple of hours. If not, Carrizo will stay in Cerro Porteño. He's still under contract, but that's probably been the biggest move in the local league so far in between teams. There was a couple of players that went from Guarani also to Olimpia. and vice versa. There was kind of that movement, but I don't think there was a huge signing so far, Ralph. I think we're still gonna have to wait for that. Maybe even a last minute signing. Even though some of the signings that Cerro Porteño made are really good players, they're national team caliber players.
Yeah, I think you're right that it's been a lot of movement between the clubs, and we haven't really seen that marquee signing. But maybe the coaches and the owners are feeling a bit burned from, especially in the case of Olympia, right? Doing those big signings in the off season last time that none of them really made an impact. And I'm liking the Olympia team. I mean, Sebastian Ferreira he always scores goals when he gets game time. He scored a lot up here in Houston until he started getting dropped. Then he went to Vasco. Yeah, Vasco didn't work out so well, but even at Rosario where he just was, I mean, he was getting important goals when he got the minutes. So in the Paraguayan league, I think you're probably going to see him definitely make more of an impact than Benedetto. So I think we're gonna maybe see Olympia slightly picking up what they're missing. But the real thing they're missing was the defender, right? And Capasso, they got him back. I mean, they didn't want to bring him in the Apertura. They tried to bring in two or three other players, and it just that really killed them in terms of from being such a good defensive side that won the title to one that just couldn't compete. So I think that's a really big signing, and often those are often safer signings. Sebastian Ferreira, of course, played at Olympia as a kid, where he was between Olympia and Libertad. But then you have Campazzo was already there, so I mean, I think these are some much safer signings. Alcaraz as well, who's come from Guarani and has been at Libertad. They're players that you know can perform in the league, and they're not going to have adaptation issues. So Olympia looking there is very strong. In the case of Libertad, we should mention that they're missing a big player in one of their youth players, right? Alexis Freitas. He broke his leg in training, and I think that's a big miss because you get the feeling that Aquino also wants to start playing with more of the younger players that he knows from his time there. It looks like he's going to move out some of the older central defenders like Martin Cáceres and Jaquet. He's probably going to bring in. I think he's promoting some kids from the youth team to start filling in some of those gaps. They're also trying to fill in Gilberto Flores, who of course he'd already gone to Cincinnati, but that was one of their young defenders they had. So Libertad maybe is a bit more transition time, and it looks like it's Olympia that are getting that really good team together. Where I'm a bit unsure about Olympia is the coach still, right? Bustos, since he came in, I don't think he made a big change to what the issue was before with Palermo. So now you've got the guy. Is it the guy that can drive the Ferrari or not? Right, as the famous quote goes. So that's I think Olympia have the players is whether they have the coach. In the case of Cerro, yeah, I think we have to wait and see if some of these players really do join. But what they did do, which was interesting, is Wilder Vieira was linked to MLS, and he's now signed an extension instead. And they brought back Fabricio Peralta. I think they've suddenly got a very good midfield with those two players. For me, Peralta, for whatever reason, he wasn't getting game time in Brazil, but when he was playing in Paraguay, he was up there. He was a very good player. They might lose Pachi Carrizo, but then I think honestly, I feel like they have a lot of players that could fill those shoes, although nobody has been able to yet. But attacking wise, Cerro haven't had too many issues except for that big striker, and it looks like that's going to be Luis Amarilla. So again, is another Paraguayan from abroad coming back to the homeland. And again, I think that a bit like the Sebastian Ferreira move, I think that's quite a smart and clever move by Cerro to not try and bring in a foreigner that could do well, might not do well, is bring someone back to the country. So if I'm looking at it, like I think Olympia probably had the best transfer window, but then I put Cerro and Libertad there, but I think Libertad are going to be more distracted than Cerro. I know they both have international competition, so I think we might see a Clausura with a classic battle between the two big teams.
Yeah, and that feels as if though we need that sort of thing. At least, obviously we have the Libertad and Guarani fans and supporters of all the teams, but always a healthy rivalry between the two biggest teams kind of makes it interesting in a way. And yeah, I think for Olympia's case, in a way, of course, this is sort of an advantage that they have to take. Like, okay, instead we're going to be focused on Libertadores. Libertad are doing it as well. Guarani have got Sudamericana. So in a way, you look at Olympia that sort of a silver lining from their elimination, which again, they didn't want to be in it, but it could probably be the factor of like focusing their attention in terms of this Clausura race. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Obviously, we're gonna be looking forward to it starting on 4th of July, of course, yeah, here in the United States, as we always cover this great tournament happening. And of course, we'll see what the Paraguayans do, or those that are still in the Club World Cup, obviously Copa America Femenina, what transfers are going to happen. A lot going on heading into July as we close out another great episode of Guarani Vision for the last episode here in June. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.